Hello everyone. So I'm back after a few hours since I've been gone earlier this morning because I was with my mom since we were going to that at the African American Museum near the Science Museum because my mom wants to meet up with this one of her classmates from Smith College, and they're having a tour of the art museum. I've only got a chance to visit the Science Museum again. Unfortunately, there's nothing new there. They have a bunch of interesting animals there, and they have like airplanes and astronauts and biology about the life of a baby to adulthood. Kind of interesting stuff. You should go there someday. They also talk about viruses. It's a free museum. You can go there someday. Well, since the Odyssey movie is really popular this time of year, well, have you guys ever seen the Odyssey movie yet? It sounds cool, but I never seen it before, but it's made by Christopher Nolan. A long time ago, he did a movie called Dunkirk, and that was a very popular World War II movie. I would love to see it again. That was a really good movie. Except, that really took me a lot of crunch and wait time for that movie to come out. Like, waiting for a movie is really frustrating, don't you think? I don't have any ancient pieces with me to make like an ancient Greek warriors, because I think I left them behind in my La Vegas house. I only have modern Lego pieces with me. What a drag. It would be kind of cool to make an Odyssey movie in Lego. It would be kind of cool to check out the movie someday, maybe on Tuesday. So basically this year we have a movie about toys, we have a movie about Minions, who work in Hollywood, except that's too many Minions movies they made. We had an Eisenhower movie, which I didn't see yet. You know, that Eisenhower movie with Brendan Fraser. That's also a good film to watch. Pressure is the name of that Eisenhower movie, but I didn't see it in theaters yet. There's also the George Washington movie where people can watch for free. That was kind of cool. That was the first movie I get to watch for free. It's called Young Washington. It's about George Washington back in the service in the French Indian Wars. Have you ever watched it? It's really good. So the Odyssey is basically kind of like a war movie going back way before George Washington was born, but 2,000 years ago in ancient Greece. So let me get this straight. There's war movies about Americans, and there's a war movie about ancient Greeks. Except, the Greeks never fought in wars over the years. Well, I guess they did. They fought in the Revolutionary War against the Turks back in the 1800s. That's why they were taken over by the Turks. That's why the Greeks never had any wars or civilized. They were kind of forgotten all these years, but they came back in the 1800s. That's when Greece declared independence from the Turks. Do you think people should make a movie about the first Olympic Games back in ancient times? That'll be kind of cool. Do you guys know the Olympic Games came from the ancient Greeks? It was discovered by a Frenchman in 1896 and brought the Olympic Games to the modern era, and introduced all sorts of countries around the world to participate in the games back in 1896. It was a waste of money though, a waste of tax money from the Greeks. Well, Greece did have a couple wars, you know, back in the Greeks did fought against the Turks back in 1974 when the Turkey invaded Cyprus. It's kind of weird for Turkey to invade Cyprus because Turkey's a NATO country. Turkey cannot invade any other nations. Maybe they were helping the Muslim ethnic people in the Cyprus while fighting the Christian Greek people in Cyprus. They want Cyprus to be a Muslim island than a Christian island. That's why Turkey invaded Cyprus. Was it Greece or Turkey? I really can't tell. Greece was taken over by a military junta throughout the Cold War era. I guess a junta is mostly a bad government, of course. They don't treat their people very well. I don't know if the Greeks ever invaded other countries back in dictator times. The reason why ancient Greece did not exist anymore, because the Romans invaded Greece and collapsed their civilization and government. And they were under Roman occupation. And then Turkey took over Greece. And they spent a whole lifetime under Turkish control. What was Turkey like under Turkish rule? Maybe the Turks forced all the Greek people to become Muslim or something. I don't know. Greek history of modern times is kind of unknown to us. Ancient history is very well known. The most famous thing about modern Greek history is the opening of the discovery of the Olympic Games in 1896. Can you imagine if George Washington were in the Odyssey movie? Do you think George Washington can help Odysseus find his way back home? That's about it. Well, George Washington did exist at the time. Transportation was kind of slow. Airplanes were not invented, trains were not invented, horses and wagons are the only transportation back in the 1700s, so as boats. But the boats are a lot faster than the boats back in Odysseus' time. They both have sailboats, but just a bunch of rows. They have rowboats back in George Washington's time. Transportation was kind of slow back in George Washington's time. Well, they have guns though. That's the difference between the Odyssey and George Washington. In the Odyssey, it takes place 2,000 years ago. Guns were not invented back then. They had used swords and spears and bow and arrows. In George Washington's time, they had cannons and guns. That makes warfare more faster. I would definitely want to watch the Pressure movie with Brendan Fraser. I haven't seen it yet, but I was told it's more like a talking film. It's about Dwight D. Eisenhower talking to meteorologists of what's going on about the weather during D-Day. Is it okay for our troops to move on to Omaha Beach, or not? Since George Washington was a very famous American general, like about 200 years ago, and what other generals were famous in American history? Dwight D. Eisenhower was a famous general during the D-Day invasion. Norman Schwarzkopf was the most famous army general of the post-World War II era. Yeah, Norman Schwarzkopf, you know, that really smart army general during the Gulf War. Can you imagine Hollywood made a movie about Norman Schwarzkopf? That would be a good movie for people to watch. That would be a good movie to see on the big screen. You know, have you ever seen videos of Norman Schwarzkopf pointing at the map and stuff like that? Well, yeah, he talked about his military advancements. That was the first time that military briefings were broadcast on television was the Persian Gulf War of 1991. In the Odyssey, the Trojan War lasted for 10 years. In World War II, the American War in Europe lasted for a year. That's pretty much a long time. But the Gulf War lasted for 2 months, January and February. It was a very short war. It has to be short because soldiers can't spend their whole lifetime fighting the Iraqis. They don't want another Vietnam. The Vietnam War was the longest war the Americans fought in before the Iraq War in Afghanistan. Imagine if Norman Schwarzkopf in the Odyssey story, at least he'll get back home in 100 hours, of course. At the time when the Gulf War happened, they had boats back then. They were kind of fast boats. They used big giant airplanes that get from one point to another. Well, if Norman Schwarzkopf traveled across the sea, I guess he traveled by boat or airplane. I think he traveled by airplane. Airplanes don't really take that long to get from one place to another. It takes hours to get from America to Saudi Arabia by airplane. But the invasion of Kuwait took about 100 hours to invade Kuwait. How long did it take for the D-Day invasion? It took about 10 days to liberate liberate France from the Germans, or maybe it was 20 days or 30 days. I have no idea. The technology of Odysseus' time was not as advanced as the Persian Gulf War. During the Gulf War, the reason why the soldiers get to destinations is because of GPSs. That was the first time they used GPSs in combat, and GPSs were kind of like the quickest way to get from one place to another for soldiers. That's how soldiers got to Kuwait very fast. To get through the desert, it's because of GPSs. In the Odyssey's time, they never had GPSs like during the Persian Gulf War or satellite communication. I wish I had some medieval pieces with me so I can make some Greek soldiers back in Trojan times. It would be kind of funny if I have the Odyssey and the George Washington movie and Pressure all having a crossover. And Norman Schwarzkopf, there's no movies about him, but I can include that guy for the parody. At least Odysseus and Norman Schwarzkopf and George Washington and Dwight D. Eisenhower will be discussing their military tactics and technology and their differences. That would be kind of cool, don't you think? The war in Afghanistan is a lot longer than the Odyssey, of course. It took us so long to fight all the Taliban and Al-Qaeda guys. We gave up and find these guys and let the Afghan guys to fight the Taliban by themselves. And we got defeated. And what about Iraq? It took us nearly 10 years to fight the Iraq War. That's because the Al-Qaeda insurgent people were really hard to fight. During the Gulf War, we were only fighting army tanks and infantrymen by the Iraqis. We have a lot of fighter jets that could blow up all their equipment. And they're wussies, of course. We defeated Iraq's plight in the Gulf War in 1991. In Iraq and Afghanistan, these wars are difficult. They're more difficult than the Odyssey story.